I'm very drawn to folklore and like fairy lore. So a lot of my work is my interpretation of how I want to see or feel that world. Immersing myself in these places that some people would say are fantasy, but I think that your imagination is just as real as the world around you. So I try to like put that onto paper. Folklore kind of teaches people about the past and different lessons and things. And I think it's important to not necessarily hold on to like pure tradition, because I think you should grow and evolve over time. But there's also like certain truths that will always be fairly relevant. And folklore is really good at just sharing those things that have happened in the past. They're helpful to people, and they can be inspiring or funny or scary, and it's just exciting. I think a lot of the darker folklore isn't even necessarily dark. Everybody has the capacity to be like both light and dark, and I think that finding a gray area, I feel like a lot of the stuff I do, even if it's really spooky and scary looking, I never want to overlook that there's a gray area, and like, even though this creature might look really scary, doesn't necessarily mean it is, because a lot of the stories with scary creatures, they're showing up for a reason to like warn somebody about something. So they're not causing the harm. They look scary, so you notice them. And I think that's pretty nice. They turn out to be more helpful, really. Even though there's lots of very specific descriptions of certain like fairies and entities, they more so are about the feeling. And you can look at different people's interpretations of the same kind of fairy, and it's really interesting to me how many people can pick up on like a certain, like very similar feeling of the same kind of like fairy or creature. So there's something really interesting about that to me. I do like specifically drawing animals. I've always really loved drawing animals ever since I was little. That was drawing possums and tigers and dogs were kind of my first kind of illustrations that I remember ever doing. So I've always just been really drawn to animal life and creatures in general. But now I do like to draw a lot of like mixing plant and animal together. So it's still nature-based, but a little more fantastical. A lot of my inspiration actually comes from listening to people's accounts that they've had and people describing things that they've seen, which is maybe more common than a lot of people would expect. So I love listening to different podcasts where people describe encounters, and I'll just do quick sketches. That's why I have all these sketches around my house. I'll do these quick little sketches and try to capture like the feeling that they're conveying through telling their story, but also just drawing as closely as possible to the way they described the weird thing that they saw. And it's really vulnerable of them to do that. And it reminds me of like just traditional oral folklore, like how people would tell stories from person to person. I don't know, it's like continuing on the tradition of telling folk stories in a way. It's just giving it this visual that it didn't have before. I guess my only hope really would be, when people look at my art, would be for them to have some kind of their own personal internal spark. So become inspired or fascinated to create their own work. I think it's really important to inspire other people to create things, because when you make your own internal world physical, I don't know, it just makes everybody, it can make you feel so much happier and healthier to let those things out.